أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. I would like to welcome you to another day of our Muharram program with Shk Salim Yusufali titled On His Path, a Husayni Lifestyle. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, to start off our program, I would like to welcome our dear brother Ali Abbas. Please help me welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا. وإن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما. ويدع الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير وكان الإنسان عجولا ويدع الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير وكان الإنسان عجولا وجعلنا الليل والنهار آيتين فمحونا آية الليل وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة لتبتغوا فضلا من ربكم ولتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب وكل شيء فصلناه تفصيلا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Please recite another loud salawat. Allah. Inshallah, before welcoming Shk Salim, just a few announcements. Inshallah, we ask you to please follow the masking and facial covering requirements that are put forth for the program. We also wanted to remind parents if at any time your child needs to take a break or you need some more room downstairs, there's a cafeteria open with the live stream and speakers downstairs as well that are on. There's also a nursing room in the back, inshallah, for nursing mothers where they're able to watch the program as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, we would also like to thank all the mu'mineen, the sponsors, the anonymous people that donated to help make these programs available to us. Inshallah, there's also a request for all the mu'mineen that are sick right now. If we could please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for Brother Mike Naji that's ill right now, and a lot of other brothers and sisters in the community that are ill right now, and also for the shuhada and all of those that passed away on the path of Islam, and all of your mu'mineen that have passed away as well. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Peace and blessings be upon you, O my master, Imam Hussein. We gather here today like every year and we feel the pain. In every land, in every plain, your message is alive and well. In Palestine, Yemen, and every corner of the world, the oppressors and the Yazids of our time are still at play. We eagerly await your grandson who will bring justice and peace and eradicate all the tyrants and the oppressors. Today and every day, we renew our allegiance to the Imam of our time. Labbaika ya Mahdi. Labbaika ya Mahdi. Labbaika ya Mahdi. Inshallah, it is my honor to welcome our dear scholar, Shk Salim. Please help me welcome him with 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعن الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected brothers and sisters, may Allah reward you for your good intentions and your participation in this gathering in order to attract the special attention of Allah and His mercy to this gathering and the special inayah of the Imam of our time. Let's recite a salawat, please. Today is the day of Friday. It's the day of our Imam, the day in which we look forward to his return in order to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. Let's recite another salawat, please. And as a gift to all those who are with us but who are no longer with us, and all the marhumin and marhumat and all the shuhada, let's send the thawab of a 3rd salawat, please. Brothers and sisters, the topic that we've been taking up the last number of nights has been how to adopt a lifestyle which is in line with the lifestyle of the guides that Allah has provided for us, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And we, in the course of these nights, we've talked about some of the things that we need to be thinking about and reflecting upon when it comes to our lifestyle. We talked about the presence of customs and habits. We talked about last night the concept of adab. And we said how that's something that is derived from the Quran, the idea that in everything we take on this perspective that how can I use this God-given freedom to understand Allah's hudud, His guidelines, what boundary He's given me in all aspects of my life, and how do I show beauty in everything that I do? That was the topic of yesterday's conversation or speech. Now, today I want to once again take up one of the principles that's given to us from the Quran. But before doing so, I want to share a story or two from the incidents that took place in Karbala. And these stories, the reason why I use them, because sometimes the theory is much better understood when we have that example. And after all, I know that your intention in coming here is, part of it is to hear these stories, to reflect upon them, to be reminded about them, and inshallah, to mourn what took place as well. So one of the stories is about a young companion of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. His name was Amr ibn Junada. Amr was a preteen, and we don't know too much about him and his background. But what we do know is that he was present in Karbala with both his mother and his father. There are some cases we have where the whole family decided that we're going to be joining Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and we're going to give everything that we have. So, and they weren't, it wasn't that they were part of the Ahlul Bayt, but that's the type of determination they made, that this is how we want to be with the Imam. So what do we know about Amr? We know that his father was martyred on the day of Ashura. And then the Maqatil say that Amr suddenly comes to the forefront and he wishes to go into the battle and now, follow his father's footsteps. And when Imam Hussein alayhi salam sees this child going towards the enemy, he says to his companions, stop him. Because perhaps his mother will not be happy for her son to go at this point. Now imagine all the events that have taken place, the journey before that, the trials and tribulations of just journeying for that long, the heat, the thirst, and so many other things. And now, to add to all of that, he has lost his father. Most people in such a situation, they would crumble. But here you see this preteen who is so brave, so courageous. And he says to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he says that, my master, my mother has given me permission to go to the battlefield. And he goes, and his battle cry becomes something which he is famous for. Amiri Hussein wa ni'mal amir, sururu fuad al-bashir al-nadhir, Ali wa Fatima walidah, hal ta'lamuna lahu min nadhir. Hussein is my master, and what an excellent master he is. He is the pleasure of the heart of the Prophet. His parents are Ali and Fatima. Do you know anyone like him? You see that spirit of wilaya. Like for him, it's very clear. He's just a child, but it's very clear that I am a follower. These are my leaders. This is my responsibility. And then he goes and he becomes a martyr. Now, there's so many things we could talk about, but one of those things which strikes me as outstanding is that courage. The courage demonstrated by a child who is not from the Ahlul Bayt, but is a companion. So keep that in mind. Inshallah, we're going to get back to that. The second incident that I want to share with you is one, again, that you've all heard about. It's when the army of Hur intercepts Imam Hussein alayhi salam's army. They had run out of water, very thirsty. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam's response to that is that let us share whatever water we have with them. And he not only gives the soldiers water, he says that feed your animals water as well too. They shouldn't be thirsty. And then there's a very interesting incident that's reported. It's amazing like the level of detail sometimes to which these reports come. This is reported in the history of Tabari, where the hadith says that the last person who arrived from the army of Hur, like the one that was sent by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the last person, when he gets there and he's a little bit late, Imam Husayni alayhi salam is waiting for him there. And he says that I saw he was waiting for me and he motioned for me to take water. And he told me that first feed your camel is really thirsty, make sure your camel like fills its belly to, so it's no longer thirsty. And then he says that Imam Hussein spoke to me using my own dialect. He wanted me to feel comfortable. And when I was trying to like drink the water, I was fumbling around. I was so thirsty, I couldn't even like drink the water straight. So he came, he tried to tell me what to do and it didn't work. Then he went in himself, he took that water skin and he started to pour it into my mouth. When you see this incident, right, you see this type of humanity, a type of like generosity, a type of dealing with other people. Inshallah, keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. Yesterday, as I mentioned, we looked at the verse which said, وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ, those who observe the hudud. Tonight, the verse that I want to choose, inshallah, to drive a principle with, this is one of the verses that the expert scholars who have focused on this topic of Islamic lifestyle, they mentioned this is one of the key verses that we can take a lot of practical guidance from. It's from Surah Al-Isra. Allah Ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. We have indeed honored the children of Adam, and we have carried them on the land and on the sea, and we have provided for them from those pure things. And we have made them excel over many whom we have created in an excellent manner. Here, Allah Ta'ala is teaching us a way to look at human beings. And inshallah, through the course of these nights, if you're going to be participating, there will be nights where I choose something which is very practical. Tonight's discussion, inshallah, is going to be practical, but there's a theoretical thing that has to be discussed first, and then we're going to get to the practical thing. Here, Allah Ta'ala is giving us a lens by which we can look at who human beings are. He says that look at what you can do when it compares to other creatures that I have created. You are such that when it comes to the land or the sea, nothing can stop you from getting to where you want to get to. When it comes to the purest and the most finest and the most beautiful of things that can be found on the earth, in the earth, that's something that only you can get access to, and you can get access to it. You have been honored and you have been given dignity above any other of God's creations. Now, Allah Ta'ala is not talking about just the believers in this verse. He's not talking about just the awliya of Allah. He's talking about every single human being, because he's talking about the children of Adam. And this is what is known in Islamic terminology as al-karamatu al-dhatiyya, meaning that nobility which is inherent to the creation of a human being. Now, when we compare this perspective to the common understanding of what makes a human being excel, you see that there is a vast difference. And this is it's one point which is going to make a huge impact when it comes to practice. We're going to talk about those practical considerations, inshallah. Typically, how do people measure themselves? What is considered to be successful? What's considered to be like, make somebody more than, they've done better than others? It's usually being stuck in one of these things, right? Like, let's say the tayyibat, the rizq and the tayyibat, right? So somebody says that, okay, what makes somebody really special is what they possess, right? Their looks, right? Their physical strength. When it comes to, let's say, the barr and the bahr, like, the traveling on the land and the sea, people say, okay, it's their possessions, like, let's say how fast you can go, what vehicle you have to be able to move one place to another, and these types of things. And these type of standards which are set into place, these are things which can very much affect the way we think about ourselves and others. The beauty standard, when you define beauty on the level of physical sort of considerations, that becomes very limiting for a lot of people. Because a lot of the physical beauty is something which is not in the control of a human being. So it becomes something like, okay, either you're born that way or you're not born that way. And then maybe somebody, their whole life, they can be looking at, let's say social media images, and they can say that, if only I was like this, only I was like that. The wealth standard, right? We know that the system by which God delivers his rizq is not something which is based on, let's say, that the amount of wealth somebody has is directly tied to the level of taqwa that they have. In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala describes, he says, mention the name of Sulaiman. And then right after that, he says, mention the name of Ayub. Right? These are individuals who are some of the richest and some of the poorest people to live on the earth. But that's not the standard for measuring the dignity and the worth of somebody. And this discussion is something that we're familiar with, but we have to remind ourselves, because in practice, sometimes we don't reflect this type of understanding. Allah has selected every single human being and has given them a type of honor that none of his other creations on the earth have. And that is the al-karamat al-dhatiyah. Now, with that perspective, now we say that, okay, well, how does that affect our lifestyle? And I want to give some examples tonight, especially when it comes to when we're dealing with the younger generation. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm seeing that, alhamdulillah, in the audience, there's a lot of younger people who have younger children. We have a lot of parents. And one of the challenges that a lot of us face, myself included, is what principles do we use to be able to raise our children in a manner where they adopt an Islamic lifestyle? And one of the things I've seen personally is that one of the biggest impetus, one of the biggest things that pushes somebody to reform is when they start to realize that they have a responsibility towards somebody other than themselves. When sometimes we think about having children, getting married and children, I'm like, oh my God, it's such a burden, right? But actually, when Allah talks about the spiritual rewards that are present for getting married and for having children, part of those spiritual rewards is that opportunity to engage in self-reform. And it's almost like what they call tawfiq ijbari. Like you basically, you're forced to do something, and it's actually something that's good for you. So when it comes to this concept of karama, we want to sum it up in two things. Number one is that we understand the maqam, the position of the human being with respect to the rest of creation. We are not a sophisticated animal. We are not out to compete with other animals in terms of what they do and then sort of, pride ourselves on that. Okay, these other creatures, these poor things, they can only eat this way. I can eat in a better way. They can move, and they're this strong, I'm stronger in this. No, these things are just, those are animalistic measures. We have a position which is beyond that, number one. Number two is that somebody who has karama understands the position of their Lord. Both of these things are important. That first of all, the greatness of a human being inherently, and then the greatness of Allah. Because even though there's one type of karama which is inherent, there's another type which is a karamatul ruhiyya, a spiritual type of dignity which can be attained by servitude to Allah. And that's what we see in the examples that we've been giving. Now, how does this work then when it comes to lifestyle? There's one principle that I want to mention here, which inshallah, if for those of you who are applying it already, this is a reminder. Inshallah, continue doing. For those of you who might not have heard this before, this is an opportunity to reflect on this. How can I take this and apply it in my life? Brothers and sisters, there's one approach towards Islam which is where Islam is a package of do's and don'ts. And our responsibility, let's say when we're training our children, you're trying to convey Islam to others as teachers, as educators, as older brothers and sisters, whatever, it's that, okay, you know what? You have to make sure not to do this, you have to make sure to do that. And that type of course, Islam does involve submission to God. Submission means like obedience, and it means staying away from what's haram. That type of approach is not doing justice to what Islam calls us towards. There's an approach which is based on this principle of karama. How does it work? It's like this. That we, let's say as a family, or we as a community, or you as a human being, you roll this way. This is the way that you do things. This is the way that we do things. We as a family, we do these things because this is who we are. This is what we've been created. Okay, it's a slight difference, but this difference can be a huge thing. There's one time, for example, where, let's say, you have one of our young girls who's now, let's say, attaining that age where she now is attaining, the age of taklif, and now, let's say, she's getting ready to observe the modest dress attire. So there's one time where you say, okay, there's all these rules, and here's the thing, and then you sort of discuss all the limits and all the. Another approach, you say that, okay, well, you are a human being. God has created you with something, and you are such an honorable, precious creature. Allah has something in mind for you. Allah gave you all these blessings, and it's there for a purpose. You have a purpose. The way we do things is that we have a lifestyle of modesty. And then with that, of course, of course we're going to do this. Right? It's not a discussion about, when it comes to, clarify, okay, so how do we do it? Then we get to the rules. We don't apply the rules at the beginning. We first say that, look at this, you have something that there's a purpose. You're going to attain that purpose. When it comes to entertainment, right? This is again a struggle that a lot of parents face, that how do I, there's so much pollution out there. Even in the children's shows that are there, and there's one of my topics of interest, to like kind of research and say that, how do they bring in those ideas at a very young age, even in, let's say, Disney, which sort of plant the seeds for something that's going to come later on. So as parents, we're like, how do we, it's like this battle that we're facing, and how do we possibly get our kids to not be addicted to this stuff? It's trash. We don't want this type of trash to enter and pollute our children, but what's the struggle? How can we overcome this struggle? Well, this approach of like, you are too precious, you're too golden to have this type of thing, to pollute yourself with this type of thing. And then it's not a fight about like this thing or that thing. It's like, oh, really? Okay, so we don't do this. We don't engage in this type of media. Oh, okay, I got that. That's the lifestyle that we choose. We don't go to those type of places. We go to these type of places. We don't watch this stuff. We watch this stuff. Right? We don't go to these type of gatherings. We go to this type of gatherings, and so on and so forth. It's not about the legalistic sort of thing. It's about the principle of being created honorably and staying honorable. The principle of karama. Now, practically speaking, there's two things that come up. One of them is how do we do this? How can we convey this type of approach to life? Because it's a principle which is, it's not, it's easy to say it, but it's another thing to actually practice it. So inshallah, I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about how does this actually look like? I mentioned a few examples right here, but I want to go into it in a little bit more detail. Inshallah, you can help me by illuminating our hall with spiritual light with this barakah of as-salawat, please. We have a tradition reported from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He says, "Man karumat nafsuhu saghurat ad-dunya fi aynihi." When somebody has karama, when somebody has a sense of dignity about themselves, Their self-esteem is something which is derived from this perspective of understanding these two things: their position as the highest of creation and the position of the Lord. They understand that they have a purpose. They understand that they're very, very special and precious, right? Then what happens is that the dunya becomes something which is small in their eyes. How did that happen? It wasn't that, that, let's say the parent in this case, that they're going and they're trying to like tell their child that no, what these people think is like really important isn't so important for you. No, it's something they themselves start to realize this, that there's something more important than what other people are chasing out there. Not that we look down upon others and say that, oh, they're losers, I'm so great. But we understand these things don't have the appeal that they have maybe to others. We have a hadith from Imam al-Islam where he talks about this concept of the dunya, and he uses himself as an example. He says that, for me, if they were to give me everything on the earth, and they were to give me control over all the corners of the earth and everything in it, they were to put it in my hand, and they were to tell me that it's okay, that I should unjustly take the husk of barley from an ant, then I would not do that because of the position of Allah. It's not about the sin. It's not about the ant being, no, it's about the position of Allah. That even what we might think of as the smallest of things, for Imam Ali Islam, that becomes something which he wouldn't touch, even if you were to give him whatever. Why? That understanding of himself, the understanding of the position of his Lord. Now, on a practical level, if it's a case that somebody who has karama, they're kareem, they adopt this quality of understanding and ability. If it's a case that it's supposed to be the dunya is supposed to be small in their eyes, then sometimes we have to look at our practices, our lifestyle, and ask, how much are we in conformance with this? I'll give you an example. Being involved with in education, we interact with parents, and we see sometimes practices which it surprise us. So one of the things you see is parents who reward their children purely on the basis of like the dunya, right? So, for example, it's a birthday. Okay, let's say a girl has now turned 13 or a boy has turned 13. It's their birthday. Oh, for your birthday, we're going to give you an iPhone. Okay, or for example, like let's say the next whatever age it is. Okay, we're going to give you a car or whatever it is, right? Sometimes you have birthday parties where the birthday party is about how many gifts and how many things. Now, I'm not saying don't have birthday parties. Please have those birthday parties. Please have your celebrations. Please give your children gifts. That's something we were encouraged by the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam to like give gifts, to like allow them to enjoy that part of the dunya which is halal. But brothers and sisters, sometimes that can be something which becomes the goal. It becomes something where, okay, I'm going to give you this thing, and that is the reward. Like sometimes we see this even for grades. If you do well in school, then you'll get, this thing and that thing. You'll get an iPhone. Now, I'm not against the iPhone either, but I am against, giving something to children who do not have the capacity to be able to deal with it in a responsible manner, and just saying that, here you go, figure it out yourself. That is something which just doesn't click for me. Especially after having seen so many cases where things have gone wrong because of this. We have to think, okay, if I'm rewarding my child, how can I reward them in a way where they see material possessions as being a rizq from Allah, as being tayyibat, not being disconnected, and they become the sole objective in and of themselves. So maybe sometimes we need to tone down those parties. We need to tone down those type of gifts and instead focus on appreciating the individual. Sometimes we misunderstand. We think that the way that my child will love me and they'll fall in line is by the extent to which I materially reward them. Whereas what they really, really appreciate is the time that I spend with them and the love that I give them. And that's what they're going to value. That's what's going to stick with them. After all, things of the dunya they're za'il, they go away. But these things, love, respect, time, tarbiyah, where you give them insights, that's the thing that sticks with them. So that's one point about practically, how does it look like? Because we're talking about practical aspects of lifestyle. Another practical element is when it comes to when told in hadith, that one of the effects of karama, like man karumat nafsuhu lam yuhinha bil ma'asiyah. Somebody who has karama, somebody who has dignity, will not denigrate themselves. They're not gonna do something to bring their level down through ma'asiyah, through disobeying Allah. Now again, how do we instill this type of understanding that sinning is bad, sinning is something which is destructive, sinning is something which creates pollution? One of them is through the concept of love. Allah loves you. Allah loves you. Allah created you with this much. How could He create you and give you so much and ennoble you and give you this much dignity and not love you? Is it the case that just because you sin, now Allah has taken away all this from you? No, you still have it. You are still somebody who has that ikram, that takreem from Allah. Allah is honoring you. But what are you doing? One of the figures who was a source of inspiration for a lot of people in recent past, he passed away not too long ago. His name is Marhum Rajab Ali Khayyat. I think some of you have heard of him. One of the advices that he gave to his son, he says that, my dear son, if you're ever walking in the street and you get tempted by some act of sinfulness, cast your head down and say the following line. This line is from Dua Joshan al-Kabir. It says, Ya khayra habibin wa mahbub. Oh Allah, you are the one who is the best of, the most beloved and the best of lovers. What does that mean? Now, practically, if you want to translate that into simpler language, that who is it that loves you more than Allah? Right? As a parent, for example, you might be speaking to your child, like, I love you so much, but there's somebody who loves you even more than me. I can't even understand how much they love you, and that's Allah. And so not only is He's the khairu habib, but He's also khairu mahbub as well too. Because if we know that, then who else could we love more than Him too? And imagine approaching the concept of sinfulness from that perspective, of that type of karama. So we talked about the dunya, we talked about sinfulness. I want to give another example about karama. Practically speaking, it affects the way that we look at other people. Because when we look at somebody through the lens of karama, you say that, this person I'm dealing with here, even though they might be annoying me, even though they might be somebody who apparently I don't have that much respect for, whatever it is, because Allah has honored them, therefore I see them as being a prized possession. This one is huge. This one is huge. Like sometimes, let's say that I'm speaking to the married people here, you get a little bit annoyed with, let's say, the spouse. Sometimes it happens, right? Maybe once in a while it might happen for you, right? Or with your children or whatever, right? And you just stop and you say, wait a minute, I'm dealing with somebody who is been وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. Right? I'm dealing with somebody who Allah is favored. Right? What right do I have? How am I supposed to treat somebody that Allah has prized? I mean, sometimes, we look at the way that we deal with our most prized possession, like let's say our cell phones, and we compare the way we treat like these human beings around us, and we say that we have more respect for our phone than we do for the human beings. There's one time when it's based on a hadith that Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, by the way, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, he was known for this quality of karama. Right? Every aspect of his life, he showed this idea of leading a noble life in line with the nobility with which he was created. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he had a neighbor who was not Muslim. And they had some they had a good neighborly sort of a relationship with these neighbors. And one time, the sewage system, or whatever it was at that time, of course it wasn't a whole system, but whatever it was, it sort of broke down in the neighbor's home, and the stuff started to leak and go towards the home of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. And it went all the way up to the wall and started enter into the wall of the home of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Sometime later, the neighbor's wife, now again, she's not a Muslim, she comes to the home of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and she wants to speak with Imam Hassan's wife about something. It's interesting, that the Imams had these type of relationships with their neighbors. And when she's talking to his wife, she sees that what's happened here, the wall, that there's this najasa that's coming, and she sees that, okay, it's coming from her home. And she's like, oh my God, this is from our own home. Here it's leaking through. She said, why didn't you tell us? Right? And, they say, okay, it's okay, we'll deal with it, right? So then she goes home and she tells her husband, and now her husband says that, oh, really? So he goes and he comes to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. He says that, look, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. We didn't know that this najasa is coming into your home. Why didn't you tell us? Imam Hassan alayhi salam tells him that, it's okay, don't worry about it. My grandfather, Rasulullah, he taught us a principle, which is that when you have neighbors, then you treat them with nobility. And so I didn't see it fit for me to tell you anything about this. I'm dealing with it. I just want to pause here, brothers and sisters. What's worse than somebody bringing their, that, right? That's probably the worst thing you can imagine. But here you can deal in a way of karama even with that, right? That's something to say there. And then the man, when he goes back home, he tells his family, okay, let's all go now. We're all going to go as a family. He brings them to the home of Imam Hassan, and he says, tell me more about this religion of yours. I want to become a Muslim. This is an act of karama. And the final example that I'll give for tonight, inshallah, is that one of the outcomes of karama is bravery. We have this tradition that says that there are 10 aspects of karama. One of them, each one of them it's worth studying, but the one that I want to highlight for tonight is bravery. And now you'll see the connection with the story of Amr ibn Junada. Shaja'a, being shuja', being brave, is one of those qualities which we're very much in need of in today's world. We very much need to teach our children how to be brave. Why? Because of the society that we're living in, the pressures that are on them to conform to a different standard. Whether we like it or not, we are swimming upstream. We are trying to do things in a different way. And whether we like it or not, there are many casualties. We've seen a lot of examples of people who just sort of give up, and then they just fold into just how everyone else is, and eventually they lose their identity. We don't want that to happen. One of the ways of doing that is to strengthen the inner resolve. Because there's so much that you can do from the outside. You can say, don't do this, don't do that, and we have to do that. There's so much that you can do from the environment, creating a pure environment. We have to do that. But part of what we need to do is to strengthen that inner self, where somebody realizes that I am too precious in the eyes of God to sully myself with these types of things, and to bring out that bravery. We see that bravery in the example of Amr. I want to give one other example here, which is from more recent years. It's from one of the shuhada. His name is Shahid Sa'id Tawqani. It's a very interesting story, and inshallah, I think our time here is I see people looking at their watches, so inshallah we're going to end up soon here. Inshallah, you can bear with me. Let's get some energy with the salawat, please. So Shahid Sayyid Tawqani, now he was 7 years old, and this was during the time of the Shah, and he was a child sports star. I'm bringing this up, it's kind of related to the Olympics that are going on. He was just a prodigy. He was just incredible at the sport that he was playing. And pretty soon he became famous, right? He was on TV at that time. He became a star. There are pictures there of the queen of Persia, going and shaking hands with him when he's like just a kid. Imagine he has connections now with royalty. He has like maybe endorsements just waiting for him as soon as he reaches the age, and he's all these things going on. And then when he's 9 years old, somehow he manages to become aware of Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi, and he meets him. And then at 9 years old, he writes him a letter. He says that as a way of protesting against the regime and showing support for your cause, I am giving up my sport. So here's this child who's going to be a world superstar, and he says, I'm no longer going to play this sport again. When he's a little bit older, 13 or 14, he has the opportunity to go to the battlefield. He understands that that's his duty. And before that, he writes a will, and he says that I made a promise to Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. And I told her that I want to be able to feel the suffering that she felt, at least somehow taste that and experience what she felt. And it's very interesting, brothers and sisters, that he became a shaheed, and the way he did so was that it was on his side and this area that that he got hit. So he that same thing that I promised, actually he experienced to a certain extent. Why am I giving this example? Because sometimes we think of these like makarim al-akhlaq, we think about karama, we think about all these topics, like these things are so like, out there, why not, we just want to focus on, just more things basic. But yes, look, we need to focus on the basics, but sometimes, we have these examples, even in children. Children, we shouldn't think of them. We should think of them as being, these are those who have subject to the karama of Allah. We need to allow that to flourish. I didn't get a chance to talk about some of those principles that we can apply to, inshallah, make that happen. But inshallah, with the help of Allah, we'll be able to explore that tomorrow evening. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight, brothers and sisters, I would like to take our hearts to Karbala, and we are going to be visiting the story of Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Hurr, as you know, was the commander of the army that was dispatched by Umar ibn Sa'ad to intercept Imam Husayni alayhi salam. And in riwayah, in the hadith, we're told that when he leaves his home, he hears a voice crying out. This was on that day that he was going to meet Imam Husayni alayhi salam. And the voice tells him 3 times, Ya Hurr abshir bil Jannah. Take good tidings, Jannah is waiting for you, paradise. And he's like, woe be to me. May my mother be deprived of me. I'm going to intercept the grandson of the Prophet of Allah, and I'm being promised Jannah. What is this? And he said, there's some voice, I just need to ignore it. One of the things, though, brothers and sisters, is that we see from that time that Hurr was somebody who, he was a different type of person. He was somebody who was searching for the truth. He was somebody who was searching for that true freedom, which can only be found, in submission to Allah and in being in line with the wali of the time. When he meets the army of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he sees Imam Hussein's karama. He sees his nobility. He sees his generosity. He sees the way he deals with his soldiers. And he tells him that I'm not here to support you, but I'm somebody who fears the hereafter. I don't want to be dragged into the fire of hell, but I'm just doing my duty. Imam Hussein tells him that, don't you know that I'm doing my duty? Don't you know about the letters? I received 30,000 letters. Aren't you aware of that? Hurr says, no, wallah, I'm not aware of this, what you're talking about. I'm just following orders. Then Imam Hussein shows him the letters. Hurr starts to think here. And Imam Hussein tells him, he says that, O Hurr, thaqalatka ummuk, may your mother be deprived of you. Meaning, it's an expression that you're not going down the wrong path. And according to some of the hadith, Hurr doesn't respond to him by talking about his mother, because he knows that his mother is Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. He knows that this is not something, there's Imam Hussein alayhi salam is not an ordinary person. His mother is not an ordinary woman. These are the ingredients which lead to his salvation, his etiquette, his fear of the hereafter, his control of his speech, his adab, his commitment to following these beautiful acts and ways of life that we've been taught. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah, Sallallahu alayka أيها المقتول بأرض كربلاء صلى الله عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. Peace and blessings be upon you, O Imam Hussein, O the one who was alone in the battlefield of Karbala without any helper or supporter. Peace be upon you, O the one who was slain in Karbala while his mouth was thirsty. Peace be upon you and the noble companions who struggled and gave all that they had in your path. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuza ma'akum fawzan azima. If only we could be with you, we would have attained such a great victory alongside you. On the day of Ashura, Hur found himself in the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, facing the army which was led by the grandson of Rasulullah, by the son of Ali and Fatima. He hears the cry of Imam Hussein, أما من مغيث يغيثنا لوجه الله أما من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله. Is there anyone to come to the aid of the haram of Rasulullah for the sake of Allah? These words of Imam Hussein, the images throughout those days of journeying with him to Karbala, his kindness, his compassion, his knowledge, his salah, his family, all of these things are weighing down upon him. Hur begins to become anxious. One of the men in the army, he says, Hur, I see that you're shaking. Are you terrified of the battle? If I had to name any man in Kufa who I thought would be the bravest amongst them, your name would have come to my lips. Hur tells him that no, I am not scared of the battle, but rather, Wallahi ukhayyiru nafsi bayna al-jannati wan-nar. I am choosing right now between the hellfire and paradise. وَوَاللَّهِ لَا أَخْتَارُ عَلَى الْجَنَّةِ شَيْئًا. I will never choose anything above the paradise. Even if I am cut up, even if I am burnt, nothing will prevent me from making that right decision. Hur crosses over the line. He makes his way towards the army of Imam Hussein. Some reports say that Hur came with his shield on the other side. Why is he doing this? He wants to make it clear that he is not coming as Hur, the commander of Umar ibn Sa'ad's army. This is a different Hur. This is Hur who wants repentance. This is Hur who wants freedom. Some say that his hands were above his head. He is coming, he is saying a dua, Allahumma ilayka unib, fatub alayh. Oh Allah, forgive me. I am the one who caused the children of the Ahlul Bayt to be terrified. I am responsible for them to be here and for them to suffer. He comes to Imam Hussein. Oh Hussein, Halli min tawbah. Is there any way that I, despite all of my crimes, that I can be forgiven? What does Imam Hussein respond? Oh, لقد تاب الله عليك. There's no delay when somebody repents to Allah sincerely. Therein at that time is Allah's acceptance of their repentance. Hur asked Imam Hussein permission. Oh Hussein, can I ride into battle right now? Maybe he doesn't want to get down. Some say that maybe he doesn't want to be tempted to change his mind. Some others say that he doesn't want to face the children. Hur takes his horse. He now goes against the same army that he was the leader of. He fights valiantly, but eventually he falls to the ground. Oh Hur, how fortunate you are as you're lying there. There is someone who is brushing the sand off your face. What is he saying? Your Imam is saying to you, Bakhin, Bakhin, Hur. Congratulations to you, Hur. Oh Hur, Anta hurrun kama sammatka ummuk. Indeed, you are someone who is free like your mother has named you. Anta hurrun fid dunya. You achieve your objective in this world, O hurr. Wa anta hurrun fil akhirah. You will be one of the free in the akhirah. Imam Hussein alayhi salam is there to wipe the dirt off of his face. But on the day of Ashura, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam is lying in the sand, who will be there when he cries out? Who will be there to wipe the sand from his face? Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. Wa say'alamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalibin yanqalibun. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept these efforts from us. We ask Him to accept this majalis and our tears. We ask Him to never allow the love of the Ahlul Bayt to escape from our hearts and for that love to be our salvation. We ask Him for the tawfiq to do sincere repentance to Him. And we ask Him for true freedom in this world and the hereafter. We ask Him to relieve the oppressed of their oppression. May He remove the oppression from our lives and from the lives of others. And may He hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin.
Inshallah, brothers, if you could please stand in front of your seats, inshallah, to join us for the Latmiya, inshallah. Before starting, if we could please, inshallah, gift a salawat to our brother, al-marhum al-Hajj Yusuf Shami. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, if the brothers could try to remember the lines and recite them with me, inshallah. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala.
We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. We are the reply to your Hal min Nasir yansuruni. Let us be your strength and shield, O the dear son of Ali. We will remain by Allah, Aba Abdullah. We will remain by Allah, Aba Abdullah. Ya Aba Abdullah. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. As your lovers, my Mawla, we are the revolution. Be it the east or the west, we are the one solution. We are the sons of Ashura, Aba Abdullah. The daughters of Ashura, Aba Abdullah. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of. We walk upon the path of those lost. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. In Yemen and in Bahrain, in the land of Palestine, your lovers are standing firm, the enemies in decline. By the blood of Shuhada, Aba Abdullah. By the blood of Shuhada, Aba Abdullah. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise also. Ya Aba Abdullah, we walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. We walk upon the path of those lost in Karbala. By the right of his dry lips, send us our Savior. By the broken chest and ribs, come back, O son of Zahra. By the blood in Karbala, Aba Abdullah. By the blood in Karbala, Aba Abdullah. Ya Aba Abdullah, we run. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise. We walk upon the path of those lost. We walk upon the path of those. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. Ya Aba Abdullah, we rise, O son of Zahra. We walk upon the path of those. We walk upon the path of those. Bala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Thank you, brothers and sisters, for attending. Inshallah, we hope to see you tomorrow night. Inshallah, doors open 6:45. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.